From the first day that I started working with the Christchurch community, I was inspired by the property and by the history of the church and by how important those things were to the people who were participating in a day-to-day way. I came to this project with a background primarily in visual art and in working with artists who had already conceived of projects. And with this project, I was encouraged by them to come up with an idea of my own.
Abigail Guay approached me to discuss the process of creating a work that would celebrate a new organ that was going to be installed at Christchurch. And this is back in 2016. So we started dreaming of ideas of how can we discover an organ by creating a piece.
I reached out to International Contemporary Ensemble, knowing that engagement with the public and that making challenging, intriguing, and new work accessible to the public was something that was part of their mission.
One of our favorite things to do is to create new pieces from scratch, and to create new pieces not only from the ingredients of instruments and concert halls and electronics, but also from the ingredients of a site and that site's neighborhood or its community. And In Plein Air, as a celebration of the site of Christchurch and its over 300-year history, became one of the most interesting projects we've ever engaged.
Getting his input on the artists to involve, immediately Nathan and Phyllis came to mind, and looking at their existing work and meeting them, seeing their immediate enthusiasm about being on the campus and creating something new for the organ and for the community, I knew it was the right choice.
We had lots of crazy ideas. The first idea was to somehow create an organ duet.
We would begin at Macy's with this gigantic Wanamaker organ.
One of the largest organs in the country, if not the world, and this new C.B. Fisk Opus 150 organ at Christchurch.
And then we would kind of deconstruct the idea of an organ and have a procession using organ pipes and these sorts of sounds down Market Street all the way to Christchurch.
It's a mile between these two sites, and several logistical hurdles presented themselves. And ultimately, I think what we discovered was that while looking around the campus itself, the church, the sanctuary, its bell tower, its history, and the neighborhood house and its history of incubating projects, all we needed was right here on this campus.
This was my first time composing for organ, and until this point I had thought of the organ as kind of a monolithic instrument rather than a collection of hundreds of instruments. Being able to try different combinations of stops and really color the sound so specifically was fascinating.
There definitely are challenges. For example, writing for piano or orchestra, it doesn't translate literally to the organ. So there are a lot of elements of the organ. It's all about sustained tone on the organ. How you voice different things and layer certain sounds on the organ is very important. It was really fun to sort of take this idea of starting with the organ, just trying to find its voice and without preconceived notions of what it should sound like. In addition to In Plein Air being an almost 2-year-long project, the organ was being built simultaneously.
Nathan and I went to visit in November, where we heard 1/3 of the organ in completion. So there were still a bunch of stops that were not put in and also still out of tune. And later we heard it I think in May 2018, when it was complete.
Every time we would come for a site visit, there would be more stops connected or tuned, some connected but not tuned. It was seeing the process of building the instrument but also the sound. I fell in love with some of the sounds that were kind of fragile and not quite formed yet. And there were also stops that were not connected to pipes at all yet. So you heard the sound of the air mechanism directed through a keyboard of open holes. So my piece Inside Voice was composed to preserve that time and transition for the organ, because I knew it would not be possible to access those sounds once it was completed. I came up with a system of using wind instruments to be the kind of bellows, using microphones and a MIDI keyboard, which would, in essence, open virtual valves to the sounds of the wind coming through the instruments, but without pitch. The narrative arc of the piece is really trying to imagine the stirrings of this behemoth, this giant instrument, beginning to find its own voice and not knowing what organ music is yet.
So I think that in getting the tour of the organ, we saw this incredible contraption to make this instrument play. But then seeing that one of these pipe whistles could just be pulled out and blown and played very easily by anybody. And then I found that it looked like whistles that I had made before with Ranjit Bhatnagar, and thought that we could make basically a miniature pipe organ that was mobile, that the ice musicians could play and move. It sounded like a ghostly organ. You know, it was out of tune and had intentionally wanted to create different beatings from the pitches that were there. And so it seemed like a slightly misplaced, small floating organ. So I think for Field Gaze, I was sort of running with this idea of the portable organ.
Phyllis Chen dreamed of this idea of having music boxes with really long piano roll-like strips that feed into the music box. And so these music boxes usually have a 2 or 3 foot long strip that you can use a hole puncher to create a melody with. And so we were brainstorming about the idea of, well, could it be longer than that? And then really asking the question, how long can it be?
So I think one of the main interests really early on in the project was how to bring the public in. I think the community music box strip, I always intended it to be a project that could incorporate everyone's strip.
As her project was coming together, as her installation of music boxes the concept for it was coming to fruition, what she was seeing the installation look like was mosaic-like, a coming together of different pieces into a whole.
But the idea of how to show them all kept changing through the 2 years, finally resulting with this idea of a 200-foot strip that fell out of the belfry.
And allow that to be the liaison between Nathan Davis's bell harmonic piece for the 13 bells in the tower and some of Phyllis's own designs using music boxes.
And there were people who came every single show hoping to see, their specific strip, being part of this fabric. So I thought that was pretty special.
Well, there's so much interest here in the site. It's such a rich history, not least of which to me was a bell tower, which has original bells from 1754. The money was raised for them by Benjamin Franklin.
Nathan wanted to create some samples of the bells that are at the top of the belfry at Christ Church and ascended the tower. It's a long set of stairways that are really narrow and wooden and creaky and old, and made our way to the bells and tried to place microphones in different arrays so that we could capture this environment of bells that the audience and the patrons of Christ Church never get to experience. And so we were lying on our backs with a microphone in one hand and a stick in the other hand, trying to figure out exactly how to get the best sound. And it really revealed some of the characteristics of the bells that someone out in the street never hears. You never get to hear a bell with your ear a foot away from it and hear how the resonance is this really beautiful, consistent tone. But we were able to capture that with the microphones. And that really had a huge influence on the piece in Nathan Davis's bell harmonic and some of the other works on the program.
The Franklin Institute every year holds a citywide festival, science festival. So when we knew we were going to be doing In Plein Air, I reached out to them, and they were very interested in exploring something around the art of the organ. And then because International Contemporary Ensemble had already been working with young people and exploring how sound is made, we were able to create a very rich sort of science fair environment in the sanctuary, and then actually introduce through Alvin Lucier's sizzles some very complicated contemporary music and really bring this audience along in participating in both aspects of that event. So when you're producing something, no matter how good it is, you always do worry that people won't hear about it and people won't come. So it was thrilling when more people than we thought we could accommodate came, and then we figured out how to accommodate them.
We didn't really come into this project thinking that somehow a church and an organ would demonstrate to us, would reveal to us exactly what we wanted to be doing creatively, but in many ways, this piece transcended all of the prior projects we'd done.
Well, one of the things that I've really loved hearing Nathan and Phyllis talk about the organ and how it will be around for 150 years, and failing to correct them because it's actually built to be around for 300 years. When you build an instrument like that and you make the investment that the church did, and the Christ Church Preservation Trust working in tandem with the church did to raise the funds for this organ, it only seemed right that we would make a very significant and meaningful investment in letting the community know that this organ is here.
I think it brought pardon the cliche, but it brought a real breath of fresh air to our staff and to our community. We were working with each other on a creative level rather than just on a mundane, are you doing this today? Well, who's taking care of this sort of thing. That was a lot of fun to sort of just have that relationship with each other and with our church community and our neighborhood.
By working with International Contemporary Ensemble and knowing that this is a piece that will go out into the world and will bring with it the story of Christ Church and Christ Church's new organ, that not only announces the organ to this local community, but it announces it to a larger music community, and it announces that this is a public instrument, and I think ultimately succeeded in doing that.